Hey guys, so as I promised in my TBR from last week, this week I have the first of my many ARC reviews, and this one I've done successfully. I read it, I was very excited for it, so this one I kind of felt like, yeah, sure, I'm definitely gonna make that one because of Ashley Winstead's other book, Fool Me Once, which I've read. Now, the problem is that I don't know that I know how to review this book well. In a way that fits what I consider a good review, because even when books are connected in a series, right, you want to review the books as independent objects. The problem is that I really don't know how to separate this book from Fool Me Once, and we're going to talk about it. So the book that we're actually reviewing today is The Boyfriend Candidate by Ashley Winstead. Now, there is no connecting information about this on like Goodreads or Storygraph, but it is a book connected to Fool Me Once. So in Fool Me Once, you have the story of Lee Stone and her once and future partner, Ben. And then in this book, this is the story of Lee's younger sister, Alexis. Now, I say that it's her story because it really is. This is a single POV romance. Eventually enter Logan. Logan is an aspiring Texas politician who is currently running for governor of Texas as a Democrat against the Republican governor who has a lot of backstory from Fool Me Once. So again, while I don't think you necessarily have to read them in order, you do not have a lot of the political context and like relationship context for The Boyfriend Candidate if you've not also read Fool Me Once. So Alexis Stone is much quieter, more introverted than her sister Lee, and honestly, she feels that difference every single day. There's been some family trauma and breakup in both the sisters' lives. They have kind of like a touch and go relationship, and Alexis has also recently been in a breakup where the reason that the dude broke up with her is it was like, hey, you're just not really exciting, you're really boring, you're really shy, and I need to go find somebody who's more interesting. And so Alexis is really feeling the weight of all of those insecurities and still living her best life, wearing her cardigans and being a school librarian. And so on the one hand, she's really happy with that life, but on the other hand, she feels like people around her think that it's lacking. So in the opening of this book, she goes out to a notorious hookup bar in the most scandalous red dress that she owns and basically says, you know what, for tonight, I am not going to be like shy and boring, Alexis. I am going to be dangerous and interesting, Ruby Dangerfield. She meets a guy at the bar. They end up talking all night. They're just having so much fun. And even though she doesn't plan for him to necessarily be a one-night stand, it turns out that there are just sparks flying every which way between them. And so they try to get a room at the hotel where the bar is. However, when they make their way up there, a fire alarm goes off. It genuinely is a fire, and they have to run the other way out. There's all this commotion. And Alexis is, really hoping that she and this guy, whose name is Logan, that's all she knows, can recover what's going on. And Logan takes one look at the paparazzi and the news reporters that have shown up to cover this brouhaha and runs away. Turns out he had good reason to run because, as I said, Logan turns out to be a candidate in a major, statewide election race who has a bit of a playboy reputation. And so his team calls Alexis basically the next day and says, hey, can you pretend to be in a relationship with Logan so that the newspapers aren't just like, wow, the playboy is back? And Alexis, being A, kind of like a rule follower who wants to help people, and B, someone who is watching her school library and other teachers around her getting their budget slashed due to education cuts, says, you know what, I think we can make this work for both of us. I'm going to try to keep my initial comments just really narrowly focused on this book itself and these characters as much as humanly possible, knowing what I know from Fool Me Once. So as far as Alexis is concerned, I, as a former librarian and someone who is getting a PhD in education and education cuts and all that kind of stuff, and I felt really personally invested in the politics and the policy that Alexis ends up pushing throughout the book. So that was really fun. I think the flip side of that is that on a character level, the Alexis that we're introduced to in the beginning kind of gets a little bit like cliched and hackneyed in the sense that she's very shy, she's very unsure of herself. But then the second that Logan has her stand up on a bully pulpit or in front of a microphone, she's like amazing, right? And it turns out that she has all of these amazing skills. And I was like, okay, it just didn't really feel like there was much of a learning curve there outside of Alexis being like, oh, I could do this the entire time, which I don't know. It just didn't really feel that satisfying because you didn't get to see Alexis grow before your eyes. She was basically just like, haha, look at my skills. I think Logan had some very interesting like internal stuff going on. He is definitely like a flamethrower who was trying to be boxed into a very specific mold by the people in his campaign. Unfortunately, because it's a single POV romance, we don't really get to see that. We get to see Alexis watching it happen and like kind of understanding it. But there was a lot of really interesting things in Logan's past that I think I really wanted to see fleshed out more that we just couldn't because we didn't get his internal monologue. I was a huge fan of the political storyline just because I think it's really funny when like my romance books also do the politics and like history stuff that I'm also interested in, and I like that as a plot line. I think that the book tried to do other things, these other things that I really appreciate in books, such as like adding in like family storylines or friend storylines, and only really did it to middling success. And that's unfortunate because there was definitely some rich stuff that could have been done between Alexis and Lee, for example. And it tried to include it, but again, with that growth that I didn't really see with Alexis, some of it just either resolved too easily or too quickly, and I was like, oh, we really could have like worked on that for a bit. In terms of Alexis and Logan as a couple, we know from the beginning, right, that they really, really want to sleep with each other, and after that, it's just like pure miscommunication and lack of communication, and they clearly begin to form a friendship, and they clearly want to be something else to the other person, but they have their reasons. And in terms of that, that was very cute and very well done. You know, I mean, you're kind of shaking the book like, come on, guys, you know you want to kiss. But I mean, that's kind of the point of the book, right? And so if you are a fan of like a slow burn, like, I want to love you, but I am confused and I think you don't like me, but secretly that, you know, is definitely that kind of a book. It's a slow burn to the point that I actually thought that this was going to be a clean romance because there are no sex scenes for the bulk of the book until the end when it's like womp. So if you're reading this and you're like flipping through it and you're like, oh, are there explicit sex scenes or aren't there? It is quite possible with this to, through a quick flip through, think that there aren't. There will be. They're just all at the end because this is a slow burn romance and we mean it. Okay, I've tried to be really, really good about not comparing this book to Fool Me Once, but my entire review is like saturated with it, even if I didn't say it explicitly. So let me explain. If you've never read Fool Me Once, you can go see my entire review. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but what I will say is that Fool Me Once was very interesting and complicated. It was a second chance romance between Lee and Ben, and there was a cheating storyline involved. I don't ever read those. I don't seek them out. I don't know if I necessarily would have even picked that book up had I really understood what was going on there. But what it resulted in was two very complicated, broken people with a complicated, broken relationship trying to find their way back to each other while also like running this political campaign. And it was also just a single POV, but it was so interesting. And there was a lot more to like chew on in that about like, you know, decisions we've made and whether or not our actions can be apologized for or forgiven, or, you know, what it takes to be forgiven, what makes a good apology. there was a lot of really interesting stuff going on in that book, and a lot of really interesting character growth that you may or may not even agree with, depending on how you feel about the actions previously taken. So with the boyfriend candidate, it's much more cutesy, it's a much more typical romance storyline, and all of that complicatedness that existed in Fool Me Once isn't there. Because at the end of the day, it is just two people who magically grow into the best versions of themselves together-ish, while having like clearly liked each other the whole time, but just not being able to like articulate that, right? I don't think that it makes The Boyfriend Candidate a bad book. But because I was very excited in the writing and like that whole like murky gray area that comes out of the first book in the series, this being a totally different feel just kind of made me a little bit sad. And if The Boyfriend Candidate had been the only Ashley Winstead book I've ever read, I think I would have really enjoyed it. So I feel very uncomfortable saying that I was like, I don't know how I feel about this book, because on its own face, it's cute, it's enjoyable, it's not perfect, but it's not a waste of your time, right? I definitely thought some parts were very, very cute, and I just don't know what to do putting the books next to each other. So with that being said, if you read Fool Me Once and you didn't like it because it was too gray and too murky and too like kind of all over the place for you, you may really like this book. So you could give Ashley Winstead another chance and try this one on for size. That is a way that this might work for you positively. However, if you were hoping for something else a little bit more in the vein of that first book, I don't really think that it's here. This is an ARC review, so you cannot try this out on your own quite yet, but you can in a couple of weeks get it from a local bookstore or your local library. And, please read them. I feel like I made this plea at the end of my last Ashley Winstead review, which is like, I need people to read both books and then talk to me about them. Because I feel a lot of things about them that are very complex, and I want to talk to somebody about them. So, even though this has been a rather lukewarm review, please, when it does come out, go read it and then talk to me about it. Because I need to talk about it more. Very proud of myself for getting this first ARC review done on time. Thank you to the publisher and Edelweiss for giving me these, and I will again just keep trucking on and trying to honor the ARCs I requested by doing all of the reviews, understanding that life is a thing with many obstacles in it. So thank you for hanging out with me. I will be back with hopefully another ARC review next Monday, and I will see you there. Bye.